Well, the US Trade Representative Jameson Greer met with top EU trade official Maros Sefcovic on Saturday after the Supreme Court's ruling amid uncertainty about what the president's new tariff announcements will mean for existing deals. Speaking to CBS's Face the Nation, Greer said those agreements will remain in place.
I've been telling them for a year, whether this case, whether we won or lost, we were going to have tariffs. The president's policy was going to continue. That's why they signed these deals, even while the litigation was pending. So we're having active conversations with them. We want them to understand that these deals are going to be good deals. We expect to stand by them. We expect our partners to stand by them. And I haven't heard anyone yet come to me and say the deal's off. They want to see how this plays out. I'm in active conversation with them on it.
Well, the European Commission issued a statement after that meeting with Greer, urging clarity from the US government on the steps it intends to take, saying the EU expects the US to honour its commitments and that it will not accept any increase in tariffs above the level already agreed. Well, European Parliament lawmakers on the Trade Committee will hold an emergency meeting later today with Chair Bernd Lang talking to social media to say he will propose a pause on all legislative work until the EU secures clear commitments from the US. Well, the ECB President Christine Lagarde told CBS's Face the Nation that changes to the trade relationship between the EU and US could create further disruptions for business.
It's critically important that all people in the trade, both outside of the United States but also in the United States, have clarity about the future of the relationships. Because it's a bit like driving. You want to know the rules of the road before you get in the car. It's the same with trade. It's the same with investment. You want to know what the rules are.
Well, let's get reaction now from Europe's two largest economies. Charlotte and Annette are standing by. Let's get out to Annette first with the latest from Germany. Annette, good to see you this morning. What's been the reaction in Germany?
It's twofold, I have to say, because everybody is stressing that's a very good sign on the political level, because clearly the checks and balances are working in the United States. That's the first reaction from, for example, the Association of the German Industry. But at the same time, people are all saying it does infuse a lot of uncertainty and it will hamper investment decisions and also supply chain decisions. That's literally the quote from the German Industry Federation. Friedrich Merz was also stepping out over the weekend, and he, of course, is stressing a united response from the European Union, saying that tariff policies do sit in Brussels and it's not for Germany to decide. But he is traveling to Washington March 2nd, so in a week's time, and his mandate is to bring there a common or a joint response from the European Union to Washington and to further discuss the situation. For the German economy as such, one thing is clear, of course, the biggest problem, or at least the most public one, is for the car industry. And here we anyway have the sectorial tariffs in place, which are not affected by the court ruling from Friday. And car tariffs are and stay at 15%. The chemical industry is the same, it's 15%. And of course, the steel industry does face a much higher burden, and that also stays the same because sectorial tariffs are not affected again. The IFO president, a very renowned research institute here in Germany, also was saying that it's probably at least for the short to medium term, not net positive for economic activity, because clearly, again, nobody knows how the framework will develop and how one should make investment decisions. But bottom line, once again, it is perceived as net positive, but of course, lingering uncertainties. And China, again, is getting even more important for Germany. And it just emerged as the biggest trading partner for Germany. And Merz is traveling there as well this week on Tuesday. So it's an interesting week ahead on the political front here.
All right, thanks, Annette. Well, the French Trade Minister Nicolas Forissier suggested that Brussels could hit back at Washington for its latest round of tariffs. In an interview with the Financial Times, Forissier urged EU members to, quote, no longer be naive and adopt a united approach against Trump's new 15% global tariff rate. Well, Charlotte's with me in the studio. Charlotte, I mean, that's quite a sort of divergence of opinions then within the EU.
Yes, that's the usual role that you have between France and Germany. France always being a little bit more feisty when it comes to the trade war with the US, so keeping that line there as well. But look, what we saw on Friday is that the CAC 40 hit a new record there as well, above the 8,500 point for the first time ever off the back of this announcement from the Supreme Court. Of course, the heavyweight in the CAC 40 are the luxury stocks that rise on the back of the news. LVMH was up almost 4.5%, Hermes 3.5%, and also the drink makers, Pernod Ricard and Rémy Cointreau both up as well, because they are the sectors that are the most heavily exposed to the exports. Because if you compare to the German economy, for example, France is less exposed, but some sectors are very much exposed to that. And we know that wine, champagne, for example, the US is the biggest market. So that's why we saw the reaction with the drinks maker and some of those luxury stocks there as well. Now, for some key export sectors for France, like aerospace, the exemption that has 0% tariffs, the exemption stays on. So that the biggest impact that would be for France is not there for the moment. What we heard from President Macron over the weekend speaking on this, first he praised the role of institutional checks and balances, avoiding direct criticism to President Trump, and also take that France would consider the consequences of the ruling and adapt to the decision.
We
will look exactly at the consequences, what can be done, and we'll adapt. Fundamentally, what is it that we want? To continue exporting our agricultural products, our luxury goods, our fashion, our cosmetics, our aeronautics, basically everything that we're good at exporting, and having other new products to export. Because we continue to re-industrialise this country, and we do it with the fairest rules possible. And so the fairest rules possible involve reciprocity and not being subjected to unilateral decisions. So if this helps to pacify things, that's good. And I think we should be rather in a mindset of international appeasement and continuity in the modernisation of our economy in all these sectors.
Now, the French Foreign Affairs Minister speaking yesterday said that they were in close contact with the European Commission because, of course, they are the ones negotiating any trade with the US. But he said that the entire edifice that had been negotiated has collapsed, of course, referring to the trade deal negotiated back in July. So they're waiting for clarity. Again, they say there has to be a joint EU response and waiting for full clarity. But as Annetta was saying, this unleash more uncertainty for companies, whether they want to invest going forward, etc. So they're really hoping in the next few days, when the deal between the US and the EU was supposed to be voted by the European Parliament, this might be suspended. So, a bit of a limbo at the moment while we wait and see what this decision by President Trump means.